Hello, welcome to the very first episode of Amateur Philosophers Play Games, the show where I'm Noah.
I'm Justin.
And together we're going to play video games, talk about philosophy, philosophical ideas, and whatever else we feel like talking about. So, this game, as you may or may not recognize, is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I'm Noah, I'll be the host.
I'm Justin, I'll be the player and the philosophical mind.
Yes, as a disclaimer, we're not professional philosophers, we're just two dudes who like talking about this stuff.
Yep.
And that's what you're here for. So, Justin, let's get started with the gameplay and started with the conversation.
All right. So disclaimer: I've never played this game, so we're gonna explore this together.
Yeah, I have played through it, but it's a great game, very good to replay. And yes, so the first topic. Today, we're going to be talking about the trolley problem. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the trolley problem, this is the idea that imagine you are standing in front of a train that is running out of control. It can't brake, it can't stop, and on the tracks, there are 5 people tied to the tracks and the train is going to run them over. It's very bad. Very bad.
Yeah.
However, you have the option to you're standing near a switch, and you have the option to flip the switch. And if you do that, the train will go to a different track where there's only one person. So, the question boils down to this. Would you kill the one to save the 5?
Yeah. And also whether or not you are morally required to pull this, whether or not you are morally required to pull the trigger and save the one.
Right. So
save the 5.
So yeah, I suppose the two questions related are: is it morally correct? Or is it morally correct to pull the trigger, and is it morally incorrect to not pull the trigger, which are mostly similar, although they're not exactly the same.
Yes.
Yes.
So, the question, this topic relates a lot to the idea of utilitarianism, where some things, where the morally best option is always to do with that which causes the least amount of harm or does the most good. So from a utilitarian standpoint, it would be morally best and it would be required that you pull the switch, save the 5, and kill the 1.
Right.
And that you are morally required to do so.
Yes. Which is, which is generally, I think, agreed to be pretty accurate. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But when taken to extremes, this can lead to some questionable moral practices. Would you kill 1 million to save 5 million? In theory, extending this outward, yes, you should do that. But the question comes down to: would you kill 1 million to save 1 million in 1? Yes. Maybe?
Yes. The problem is it comes down to an arbitrary cutoff line where you decide, okay, this is the point at which you would save more and which is the point at which you would save less. And the thing is, the trolley problem in this very basic form, simple form, most people seem to either agree that, no, you shouldn't do it, or you should, pretty easily off the bat, based off numbers. The issue gets more complicated when you start playing with the values and the context of the actions. So there are several variations of the problem which make you either more or less responsible or more or less morally obligated to do something.
Right. Yeah, so we got the basic thing out of the way. We've killed 1 person so far. Let's see how many more we can kill on our runaway train.
Yes.
On our runaway train of a podcast. So the first variation is, again, if this is under the implication that they are all... The basic variation is that they are all strangers, or they are all equal in a sense. So, what if, for example, the 5 people are 5 strangers, the 1 person is an acquaintance of yours? Are you still obligated to kill your acquaintance? We'll say you don't know them super well, but you've met them, you're aware they exist, they know you exist.
Yes. Much similar to a coworker kind of idea.
Yeah, a coworker.
Someone you know and then you talk to regularly.
Or
do you have a social obligation to protect them more than you have to protect 5 strangers?
Right. Or for those of you who are more likely to be watching this kind of gameplay, a person in class. You're not friends with them, but you don't dislike them per se.
Yes.
So what do you say? Do you have an obligation to kill the 1?
So me personally, again, I agree with the idea. I'm much more of a utilitarian in this sense. So I personally agree that no, you should. The fact that the person shouldn't weigh your decision in any way. So even though I might feel bad about doing it, And I'm not saying necessarily that I would do this, because it's, hopefully I will never, none of us will actually be in this situation. But it's possible that I would say that morally, I am required to kill my acquaintance to save the 5 because it's morally better to do so.
What if it's more than an acquaintance? What if it's a friend, a close friend even?
Again, I think that it just comes down to a utilitarian perspective. I think that there are social obligations that we have, but that we should all agree that when it comes down to numbers, that's the best way to decide what's best and what's wrong.
Right, but does it all come down to numbers? I mean, I agree. I'm something of a utilitarian. Even I like to weigh things mathematically whenever possible, but not everyone is like that. You and I are. I'd say we tend to think very similarly, but I'm aware that there are plenty of people out there who don't think in the same way we do. So, can you weigh it down to numbers? Can you say that a person who's close to you, let's make it even more, a friend, your girlfriend, or a lover,
right.
Your girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, whatever they call it these days, I can't keep track. Whoever this is, are you morally obligated to save that person over 5 total strangers?
See, that does come interesting, especially if it's a someone you are a spouse. You take a promise to protect and love that person and to be with them forever. And so, can you help contribute to them, to them dying? It seems like you can't, and that you are then morally required to uphold your obligation and save them and destroy and kill the 5.
Right.
And I think that there are some arguments there. The other big aspect of this is actually about how just because you can be morally required to do so, whether or not you are to blame. So for instance, let's say you the victims of the 5 family members, or the 5 people. The family members of the 5 victims, after you've pulled the trigger and you've killed them, or you haven't done so, can they morally blame you for having to do what you did, even if you think it's morally right? Or let's say it's the one person. If you run over the one person, can the family come and say, "Hey, you killed my son," or you killed my family member, and then are you morally responsible for that? So not just what is best, because that's a really easy answer with utilitarianism. The question is also more of, can you deal is it socially right to hold them accountable for what they had to do? And that's
I think that's a good question. A good way to answer that is, imagine you don't do anything. Instead of deciding, I'm going to throw the switch, or I'm not going to throw the switch, you say, I don't want to think, I don't want to do this, and by doing so you let the 5 die. Could the 5 come and say, hey, you let my family members die? And I think yes, they could, because you had the ability to save them. Right. So the question becomes, do you have a moral responsibility? And it's very interesting. You didn't ask for this responsibility. The trolley problem setup says this is all happenstance.
Yes. So
you didn't choose this. You're not trained for this per se.
Yeah. The idea I think behind this is that a part of it for it to be actually reasonable would be for you to have you can't have had time to really think about this and weigh the decision prior, we are doing now. Ideally the person in the thought experiment, they haven't gone through taking the time to think about the moral implications of everything they're doing, and so they are just left to their own devices saying, hey, I hope this is the right thing to do in this moment.
Yeah, I mean I agree, but here we are. We can't be in the moment, otherwise if we were in the moment this would be a very short episode.
Yeah, yes, definitely. So I think that like I said, going off what you were saying about how there's some people. What was your last point? I actually just lost.
My last point was let's say it's a family member or a spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend, someone very close, but I arbitrarily close, whoever the closest person you are.
Right. So when you start dealing with that, then you start changing it from a merely qualitative or numbers. It's not just numbers now. Now you have the added factor of quality of the people, which goes into some other thought experiments. It's let's say the people are morally the 5 are morally wrong somehow. Let's say they're criminals that deserve to die anyway. Are you able to be their executioner? Can you cast judgment on them and say, oh, you deserve to die, your life is less valuable?
Right, exactly. Or this is even going to be my next point. Let's say these are criminals who are morally, and they're on death row. They're scheduled to die and be they are scheduled for the capital punishment within, I don't know, a few weeks or something.
Yeah.
Do their lives have less value because their lives are going to end soon?
Right.
I personally, I think yes, because they've, assuming they're criminals, they've been convicted fully by the court system. I think, yeah, they're essentially less valuable people because, well, they've been convicted to die. They're going to die sooner or later. Again, I wouldn't, if it were no people versus the 5 criminals, I wouldn't kill the 5, but excellent work. You cut down a tree.
Yes.
So the real question is, was that tree a convicted criminal?
That's very true. You see, like, yeah, I did it for the benefit of me. You know, I did it to help myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the greater good of Hyrule.
Yes. That Hyrule needed that tree dead. But we don't live in Hyrule. So another interesting question, I thought, what if we said convicted criminals? I think I can pretty strongly say, yeah, you should save the one innocent person over 5 convicted criminals. What if they're not convicted criminals? What if they're not even criminals per se? Let's say they're 5 basement dwellers, you might say. You know the stereotype, the kind of people who sit around, play Breath of the Wild. They live in their mother's basement past 30, providing nothing.
Start YouTube channels and talk about philosophical
channels. People who provide nothing to society and in fact are a drain on society. Can you say, and let's say the one is an average person, you know, I'll say they work at a mechanic. I wouldn't say they're a great worker, but they do something. They're a good person. They have regional relationships.
Yeah.
So can you kill the 5, or can you kill 5 worthless? You can't see that I'm making air quotes, but I'm quoting here. Would you kill the 5 worthless people to save one useful person?
Yes.
And that leads to some very interesting implications either way.
Yes. And so I agree. I think that it does change at that point when you start looking at, because you have to think about your overall, like, how you are, like, what you're presented with. The idea is you want to try to minimize your damage and maximize your good. And there are some people who don't agree with that, though. They think that, like, going back to what you were saying, that some people think that you can't, like, as an individual, you don't have the power or the authority to cast those judgments. And so that, like, the best thing to do would be to just simply do nothing. And that you are morally, when you decide to take action, at that point you accept moral responsibility for your decision. Whereas if you are just in that situation, you could simply stand by and watch and say, I didn't set the trolley up, I didn't put the people on the tracks, so, like, I'm not morally required to do anything.
Yeah, I hear that argument, but have you all ever heard the statement, evil only prospers when the good stand by and do nothing?
I agree.
I agree. I think to stand by and watch evil happen when you have the power to intervene is you become partially responsible for that evil.
I think there's some truth to that. I think it was Plato who said that whatever's in our power to do is also in our power not to do, and that, like, by not doing something, that is an action in and of itself. By choosing to just stand there and watch, you're taking the action of inaction.
Right. And for clarity, this is Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, not Play-Doh, the fun blue substance.
Yeah.
Different,
but equally fun. Surprisingly.
Yeah. Have you ever thought how interesting it is? We still quote Plato here. It was 3,000 years ago? Something like that, yeah. And he and Aristotle and Socrates, those 3 old dudes, are still the basis for a lot of what we're talking about.
Most Western philosophy.
Yeah, most forms of Western philosophy for 3,000 years, presumably, and will be as long as Western civilization persists. It's an interesting existential, I don't know if I'd call it horror, but
development.
So, yes. Getting back, I don't think we ever answered the question, do you kill the 5 worthless dregs of society to save one just pretty average person?
I think you do. I think it makes no sense, because even though at that point you are taking more lives, the benefit that the person provides, the single person, outweighs the 5 deadbeats.
So how about 10 deadbeats?
See, and this is where you have to start drawing an arbitrary line of, well, how many is it worth to save just one? And then for that, it's like a more personal boundary that people have to develop and argue with themselves and toss and decide, well, at what point would I say, okay, this is too much? Because there's always the extreme where, like, you can just keep adding numbers and playing with the values. So, like, I think before this we talked about another scenario where it's like animals.
Yeah. In fact, let's go to that. I think that go from deadbeats to dogs. Sounds like a good rap album.
Yeah.
So let's say instead of 5 humans, it's 1 ordinary human and 5 dogs. Can you sacrifice one human to save 5 dogs. Dogs. I love dogs. My family owns a dog. I love him. I would not want to see him run over by a train, in case that wasn't clear. But I think you have a moral obligation to sacrifice 5 dogs to save a human, because a human life is worth more than a dog's life, is worth more than 5 dogs' life. But you can see where this is going. How about 10 dogs? Personally, I would say, again, a human life is worth more than 10 dog lives. Well, how about 15, 100, 10,000? How about the life of every dog on planet Earth? So the existence of a species, an animal species, not a human species, but the existence of a species versus one human.
At some point, it feels like at that point you have more. There are more implications than just simply the decision of killing like the one person.
Yes.
Or killing the animals. Like if it's just one, okay, well that sucks. But if you wipe out an entire species, there are people who like need, like they contribute to like the ecosystem and everything, and then you have this is actually something that happened, or a question that people had to deal with for something I did.
That's what good.
Oh, yep, I died.
Yeah. You have gravity exists.
That fall damage. So the question becomes, or like this was a real question that people had to answer. They with mosquitoes in I believe a South American country, they were attempting to try to extinguish them all because they were causing malaria, and the malaria was killing lots of people. And so they said, well, what if we just like made it to where the mosquitoes would like be unable to breed and then would die out? And they were like, well, we can't do that. Even though they kill people, they also like help the ecosystem. And by us killing them, we'll do more harm than we will good. Even though they're just insects that nobody likes. I don't think I've ever met a single person who's like, mosquitoes. I love them. Yeah. That early summer.
I think if you are the kind of person who loves mosquitoes, that you probably count as one of the deadbeats.
I agree. I think that's a very accurate.
Pro tip: press the plus button.
Plus button.
And let's see. You can switch items.
Right.
Wait, we've been talking a lot about philosophy. We haven't been talking about the game a lot, which I think is the goal of our podcast.
Yes.
But it will watching you
fumble
die
about
over time. So you can press R. You can save. Yeah. And then I forget which one it is. It might be minus. That is you can access fast travel, which is helpful if you're trying to get down from So you can fast travel to any blue marker.
Oh, cool.
So you can go back to starting loan. Well, I guess you can't.
Nope, can't do that. Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess you just have to climb down.
Okay.
But anyway.
Okay.
Getting back to killing deadbeats.
Yes.
Or
whether or not you should kill deadbeats.
Whether or not you should kill deadbeats. Yeah. I understand what you're saying about the secondary effects of killing dogs, but let's imagine a hypothetical world where there are going to be no secondary effects or very minimal secondary effects. I'm sure some people will be sad, but let's assume these dogs are not going to cause major damages. They're not even, and importantly for this, the death of every dog on planet Earth is not going to cause the death of any humans. Okay. Yes. So, this raises the question, does the value of one human who I think we can agree a human life is special, more special than an animal's life. Does the value of one human outweigh the value of an entire species of non-humans?
Exactly. And I think that comes with this is also a very big stipend that we have to address, because there are people who think that killing animals is wrong no matter. It's just as valuable as killing, or just as bad as killing a human. Lots of vegans take that stance. That's why we shouldn't eat animals, because their life is we hold just as much value as a human life. And so saying it's just a cow, who cares, is just as is the same as saying, it's just a person.
I agree, but so, I have yet to find the vegan who won't swat at a mosquito that is biting them. So.
I know. I think that once again this comes down to an arbitrary line that we draw with morality. It's saying it's okay because I don't know, it causes me harm or something. And so I think that I still think that even if you want to take the route saying it's not gonna harm people by not having dogs, you still will contribute to I think even in the most extreme thought experiment, you couldn't really argue that there's not going to be any kind of implication, because you did change something. You changed the entire world by extinguishing a species, and that can most likely will never come about again.
Okay.
So you did end something that was once there that will never be able to be undone. So you did something very permanent, that could have effects later that we can't know about.
Okay. So you said something about extinguishing dogs. That's a good point. What if I said we kill every dog on the planet except for one breeding pair or two breeding pairs, however many you need to
we go full Noah and take 2 of each kind?
Yeah, exactly. Go full Noah. Haha, my namesake. Exactly. So let's say you keep just enough alive that the species will survive, but everyone else dies. Every other dog dies, rather.
Okay. I think at that point it comes back to the numbers where it's like you're not doing so much harm, because I believe that innately an animal life is worth less than a human life, because humans are capable of much more. And so even if you go through and you like allow the species to continue, you're doing better by keeping the humans alive. So yeah, as long as like you can like reduce it down to a number where that like the effects are still there, I think that it's reasonable to say that like because like if you look at dogs, why do we have them? We have them for like companions and like comfort and things like that. That's more of a luxury than like a requirement. Whereas like if you take someone's life, like that's
you cannot live if you are dead.
Yeah, exactly. So like the idea is like dogs are there to make life better, but you can't have a better life if you have no life. And so by taking away dogs, yeah, some people will be sad, but that sadness doesn't mean that you get to like kill people. Like that seems like a very sketchy moral code to live by. Oh no, this makes me sad. Kill them.
yeah, it's rough, because at this point you have to say, agreed, a human life is worth more than a human life is worth more than a dog's life, and even a human life is worth more than a human's happiness. But how about how many humans own dogs in the world?
Oh well, can I get it back? Nope, I don't think I can. Can I?
Don't think you can. I think maybe if you threw it onto the ground you could, but it's a sword.
Yeah, it's very heavy.
I've heard. Yeah. So a human's life. The happiness of how many humans equals the life of one human. You see the equation I'm trying to build here. So
yeah.
Let's say getting rid of a pet. Obviously, it'll be different for every person, but getting rid of a pet is a certain amount of happiness that you remove, whereas killing a life, well, that's a life.
Should take away more than a pet. Although I would say that some people are very attached to their dogs and would very gladly sacrifice one of their children to save their dog.
Yeah, which is perhaps that'll be an issue of another.
Perhaps I think it should be. I think that's a very whoops.
Let's see. I believe it's.
There we go.
Yeah, hold it and then scroll. Yeah.
There we go. Okay, let's do this.
Time to commit a trolley. This is a problem right here. So these people are attacking you. This is a little off target.
Yeah, a little bit.
It comes down to the same thing. It's all about death in the end. Don't quote me on that. You can quote me on that if you want. Yeah. So we've run circles around here. Another interesting question. So we've talked about dogs, and dogs are animal life. Vegan. There are people who say animals are worth as much as people, but I'd say generally an animal is
I think
less
there are
valuable.
people that say everything about everything.
Yeah. I'd say most moralists and philosophers would agree that an animal is worth less than a human. So here's an interesting variation I thought of. What if we live? Imagine we made contact with an alien species. They're sapient. We'll assume they're about as smart as a human. What if it were 5 aliens versus 1 human? Now the aliens are sapient, but they are not human.
Right.
So, are you obligated to protect your species, or is it more a function of sentience?
See, I agree. I think this is a big question, because it gets more into the idea of like a much bigger question, which is what is life? Let's go real deep first session. What is life? How do you know that you are alive? It's like you have this idea, like we all agree it. We all agree on it. Like I don't think anyone would deny that like you are alive and I am alive. So we are living
people on
things.
The internet. Do we really have lives?
It's a good question. I think people would agree. Okay, yeah, we have lives. Like we're living things. But then like, is an alien a living thing? Like, is it alive? If it is, how do you know it's alive? Like, what qualities about it tell you, oh, this is a sentient living thing? Unlike, say, some animals, because like, for instance, dolphins are extremely smart, and they can do they I would argue smarter than some people.
Yes.
So I mean, like, is that, or like, taking it further, a child isn't particularly smart, but it's like somehow we consider them alive. So Is the alien alive? Is it really a life, or are we just like, I don't know, killing another?
Well, it's alive in the biological sense, but plants, it's alive. Plants are alive, but most people. I think the question is more: is it a human life or a sentient life? Because let's assume these aliens are alive in the biological sense. You know, they have blood and they require oxygen to survive, and nutrition, they reproduce, all that stuff.
Okay, all that fun jazz.
Yeah, all that fun jazz. We're also assuming. I think if you go up to that center one, there's a treasure chest up there. But we're assuming also that they're intelligent in the same way a human is intelligent, and this is a bit hard to define, I would say, but I don't think it's wrong to say even the smartest animals, monkeys, some monkeys, dolphins, they're intelligent, but it's not the same as a human intelligence. Humans can reason, humans can write language. I'd say is a big one, especially written and communicated language.
Right.
Humans have a certain level of intelligence, and this is something that really I want to talk about this on a future podcast. That's a whole separate topic. Let's not get too deep into it.
Oh yeah, no.
We're assuming this alien has human level intellect and reasoning capabilities and all that jazz. So, do they have a human life? They're not. This alien's not human, but does it have a human life?
Right. So I think the question, and so setting up the scenario again, it is 1 human life versus 5 aliens.
Yes.
At that point, I feel like, and we're assuming they're all strangers. Like
they're all strangers.
Okay. So
make it simple.
Given those factors, I think it's right back down to utilitarianism, where you have to say, okay, it's 5 lives that will contribute just as much as the other human life. Just because they are foreign doesn't mean that they somehow are less valuable.
Yeah.
And so I think at that point, no, you are required to kill one of your own to save the aliens.
Yeah, which is...
I want that noted when the aliens take over that I took that stance.
Yeah, exactly. That's the real reason we started this podcast. So, when our alien overlords take over, they know what side we're on.
Yep.
But yeah, it is a good question because we haven't really experienced this as a species. The idea of the value of a species, although. Do you want to get into what we talked about?
Oh,
earlier?
let's not do that. Let's say
not on the first episode.
Let's say it for another episode.
Yeah.
But yes,
as a species, we haven't experienced how do we interact with another species of equal intellect, but different, fundamentally different.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting. Interesting thought to bring in, like the idea of having an alien, and how that factors into like our ideas of morality.
When I go to the big orange thing on your right,
big orange thing. Getting the acorns, bro.
That's more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so there is another variation of the thought experiment, because a lot of this, like people, like I said, like will take the stance of, oh, if you could do nothing and that's fine, or like they'll say like, well, because you are put in a situation, you don't bear the burden because like you were forced in that situation, and like you basically like forced to make a choice that was bad either way. So there's another variation where instead of simply like being on the trolley or like standing by, you're on a bridge overlooking the trolley as it's coming towards you, and you see below, you see 5 people, and behind you is a very large man, and whom you could for a fact you could reasonably shove off the bridge, and he would fall onto the track, stopping the trolley. He would die, but the 5 people would stay. So you would have to actively push him off and kill him. As opposed to simply pulling a lever that's like more disconnected. You're making a person where like he hasn't done anything to you, he's not involved in the problem, like he's not gonna die or anything. You have to actually put him into the trolley problem and push him off. Are you morally required, or is it morally justifiable for you to push him?
Yeah, and it's interesting because fundamentally it's not a different problem. It's you kill one person to save 5, but it feels different, doesn't it? Because it feels like there should be a difference between tossing a switch versus getting your hands dirty and shoving someone onto a track. But really, I can't think of a reasonable reason why they should be different. So
the difference is that like you're taking someone who was not involved at all and then forcing them to be involved. So you're adding that extra, like if you're already on the tracks and everything, like obviously someone put you there or somehow you ended up there, that was beyond your control. But this person is just a bystander who's just like you, and like it seems more like you could blame them and say, hey, you actively killed this person for you actively did this. Whereas if you pull the switch, there's a much more passive idea behind it, where it's like you are forced to like choose between these two things, and somehow there's like an added human element where it's like you did something worse than like pulling a switch and like messing inside the problem. You did something there, and something about it makes it worse for you. I
understand what you're saying, but at the same time, presumably the one person who was tied to the tracks doesn't want to be there. They were in bystander at one point, so I really don't see I really don't think it's different. It's, of course, if you get into the details of the trolley problem, there's a question of, oh, well, how did these people end up tied to the tracks? But going for the fundamental thought of what the problem is, right. Can you sacrifice a few to save the many? It's not, I don't think it's any different. So I would say, yeah, it's your job to push that person over the bridge.
See, that's the other question, is like, there's a difference in the question between, okay, whether or not it is your duty or whether or not you can do it. So are you required to push them off?
Right.
Or is it simply, if you push them off, I couldn't blame you for it?
Yeah, Turn around more.
Oh, hey, look, there's a thing.
You control magnets now.
I do.
See, if you had this power, you could magnetic the train. Try lifting it up.
Okay. I was thinking I had to keep it. Okay.
Yeah. And then drop it by pressing B. There's now a little hole you can go into.
Oh. Okay. But yes.
So the question is it a morally neutral thing to push the person off the track, or is it a morally good to push the person off the track? And I would say I don't think it can be neutral, because you've got one way or another, you've got a duty here. Because you have been whether or not you like it, you've been forced into this situation. Who was it that said? Was it? It was either Churchill or Jefferson or some other old person like that. Like, some people have greatness forced upon them. In this case, you have the duty forced upon you. You didn't ask for it, but now that it is here, you have a duty to uphold it.
I mean, I get that idea, which gets into a whole nother part of ethics about whether or not, like, what you're required to do, especially when it comes to things like, another interesting thought experiment.
Try moving that middle one in the wall.
Yeah, that was, about whether or not you are required to do things.
Try pushing the bricks down. Whether or not you're required to do things for...
if those things are bad for other people. So there's another thought experiment that goes into this a little more. It's Nazis at the door is a very common one. So imagine that you are a German living in Nazi Germany, and you're harboring Jews in your house. Nazis come and knock on your door and say, "Do you have any Jews in your house?" Are you morally required to lie, which is something that's bad, right? So, because like the idea behind the trolley problem is that like there is no good answer,
right?
Like it's not supposed to be like, oh yeah, this is clearly the right answer and everything. So the question is like, are you morally required to lie and say, oh, no, I don't have any Jews, I'm not harboring Jews? Or are you required to tell the truth and know that, like, by doing that, you will cause, like, the Jews to die?
Yeah, I would say, I think you're morally required to lie here because, well, first of all, if you're harboring the Jews, you're already lying. But setting that aside, you are doing... It is a question of the lesser of two evils in this sense. I think most people would agree. Lying to a corrupt government official is less evil than condemning innocent people to die.
Right, but then like, so I think this is actually a very interesting way to do the trolley problem, because the question is then like, it's the same thing as the social obligations when you start changing the trolley.
The ladder's back there.
I know. I'm just looking around.
Okay, just making sure.
So it gets into like the more social aspect of like when you start doing variations of the trolley problem. The question is, okay, so. You say, okay, you're required to because lying to a corrupt official is somehow less, but aren't you also morally required in the same way like you're morally required to like protect your spouse? Aren't you also morally required to listen to the state or do your duty as a citizen, even if you disagree with what the state is doing? There's a certain idea.
That is a great question, but we've already been recording for almost 35 minutes. I feel like that's gonna be a full episode in and of itself. So
I agree. So I think we're I think we're at a good stopping spot.
Yeah. you want to do one more the fun one?
Oh, okay. We can wrap up the fun one.
I agree. Let's talk about that duty to the state one at a future episode.
Yeah.
But for now, this is a fun one. So let's say this time you've got the power to pull the tracks, to pull the trolley. You got the tracks, but their tracks are actually connected. So if you pull it the one way, if you pull it to kill the one, the train will loop back around to kill the 5. If you let it kill the 5, the train will loop around to kill the 1. So you can't really save any of them. But if you choose to kill the 1, there's a $100 bill lying on the tracks. You'll have enough time to grab the $100 bill before the train loops back around and crushes it. Whereas if you choose to kill the if you choose to kill the 5 or the 1 first, then the train will crush the bill and you're out that way. So you don't have any power to actually save anyone. So the question is it morally acceptable and is it morally your obligation to kill the 5 first in order to earn $100, or I don't know, donate $100 to charity, whatever you want to do with that money. It's up to you.
Yeah. So there's actually, the way this starts to work, there's not supposed to be a person on the track.
Oh.
So it's supposed to be you could pull the trigger or you could pull the lever and it will divert from a $100 bill and just kill the 5 people. Or you could not, and it's going to run over the $100 bill and then like loop around and kill the 5.
Well, it's the same thing.
So yeah, so the question is, well, there's one less life to kill. So like it is purely about like if it's gonna happen anyway, should you do it to just make the $100? Or and then like, are you morally like is it okay to do that? And then like, okay, maybe $100 is enough. Let's say it's $10,000, or so much that like every family of the victims would get like $10,000 from the benefits. Is it okay to like say, oh well, I'll pull the trigger, like delay your death or whatever, and then you can you'll be I see, like you'll get something out of it. And it seems like at some point you have to say, like, especially if you're going to do like the utilitarian approach, yes, it is totally fine to pull the trigger and just slaughter 5 people for a quick $100.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you have the choice between saving 5 people and $100, I think you should save 5. But since they're going to die anyway, I think, yeah, you really... Now, I don't know if you have a moral obligation. I don't really know if you ever have a moral obligation to make money. That'll be an interesting topic in the future. But I think it's morally acceptable, yeah, to let the 5 die a bit quicker in order to save $100 that you can use for some good in the future. You could use to... I wouldn't go very far to the funeral of the 5 people, but, you know, it's a start.
And actually, to end it with a bit of a cliffhanger, that has a lot of deeper moral implications when it comes to like capitalism and exploitation and whether or not you could do it on a larger scale. Like, let's say, do an entire country. Can you make an entire country suffer if you can earn a quick buck for it? If you think you're going to suffer anyway.
Yeah. Well, that certainly will make us canceled. But hey, you can't get canceled if no one knows you exist. So
it's very true.
Let's watch this cutscene, and then I think that about covers it. So yeah, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I'm sure you've heard a million YouTubers say it, but it really does help. It helps us get recognized. It helps you get more content of us talking about killing dogs and people and runaway trains.
And remember, the comment section is always there. What do you think? You know, keep it open. You know, if you have possible objections, we love hearing them. So.
Yeah, leave them in the comments. I like to say, I love being told I'm wrong as long as you can have a well-reasoned explanation why I'm wrong. So please, if you have any thoughts, leave it in the comments. If you have any ideas for future topics for videos or future games we should play, leave that in the comments. If you don't have anything at all to say, but you just want to leave a comment, leave a comment. And I think we've bought enough time. Just press X. Let's get this over with.
All right.
And
with that, we
end you. And this has been Amateur Philosophers Play Games, and we'll see you next week.